I'm a consultant clinical oncologist. I work in Shropshire as part of the West Midlands in a cancer centre that's attached to a district general hospital. My speciality is clinical oncology. I treat breast cancer, head and neck cancer and non-melanomatous skin cancer, and I see patients that have those diagnoses for consideration of treatment either radically or palliatively with either systemic therapy, so that's chemotherapy, targeted therapy, hormone therapy, immunotherapy, and also radiotherapy. And a good day at work would start firstly from the basics with a full staffing level, with a good team around me, with my registrar, specialist nurses, and full clinic team, seeing patients that I think I can provide the very best care to, and then being able to focus on some technical aspects of radiotherapy with my radiotherapy and physics team. During the pandemic, locally, as I'm sure nationally, our focus changed from meeting in large groups face-to-face, such as MDTs. These changed to virtual where possible. And in terms of rep interaction, this was predominantly email and using virtual tools, typically Microsoft Teams, but could be other links like video or Zoom. The topics did change as we focused a lot more on practical aspects, I felt, rather than promotional material. The rep interactions focused more initially on getting things right in terms of getting people together. So meetings with colleagues around the region to discuss challenges and possible solutions for that. For example, moving things to home care where that was feasible, such as allowing patients to have particular selected medications delivered to them at home rather than coming into the chemotherapy unit to reduce footfall during the height of the COVID pandemic. I think initially the visits were very, very minimal, and then as people got used to working with COVID and developed a newer way of working, I actually think the visits from reps virtually or contact via email, I think increased a little on pre-COVID levels. I think the overwhelming impression I have from interacting virtually with reps from various pharmaceutical companies in the pandemic has been very, very positive. I think this is because when meeting people virtually, I found that a time can be chosen by myself and my secretary and arranged with the rep so that there's an actual slot almost allocated to them. So there's a set time, which whilst it's not always possible to run exactly to that time, and it's not possible not to be interrupted, of course, I think that's a lot easier to be diarised than simply having a rep arrive face-to-face whilst you're in a clinic, for example. I've never liked that, and I've never really allowed that. I much prefer a well in advance organised scheduled time if I'm going to give the rep the time to discuss whatever it is that we're going to discuss. And I think we've seen a number of new drugs, particularly in breast cancer, come onto the scene in the last couple of years, and it's really important for myself but also the wider team to have access to educational meetings and educational materials. So, for example, a number of meetings have, of course, been outside of typical work hours in the evening, where it's very easy to get virtually a speaker from, another part of the country or simply beamed in. So you can connect a lot of people very easily, and you can gain experience from different regions, different speakers, different people that have done the trial, so you can get the right people talking rather than having to physically go to an event. It's much easier and it's much more convenient, and it can reach a very wide audience, as there's not really a limit on how many people could join an educational meeting. So I think for myself and the rest of the team, it's been very, very helpful, as those people with, say, other commitments outside of work, or that couldn't drive to a location that's much further away than home might be, it's allowed people to attend, whereas they may not have been able to do that previously. I would like the vast majority of any rep interactions to remain virtual, as I find that easier, and I've always found it a little intrusive with reps physically coming to centres, and like I say, I never really tended to see them during work hours face to face anyway. Virtual has been incredibly efficient for most things, and I would like to keep it. In terms of face-to-face meetings in the evening, talking about educational content, I think that is something that I have missed, and that's what I would like to have back, but only for very selected times, for selected topics, because I think that the face-to-face interaction with the rest of your team, well, really the wider team, because you see your normal team anyway, so say pharmacy team and surgical team and so on, that would be nice. And it helps if you know everybody very well anyway, which fortunately I did in the MDT, but for newer members, I think being predominantly virtual would be very difficult to start with, and I think the occasional face-to-face event really helps to build team spirit and team morale, and you know a little bit more about that person than simply seeing their face on a screen when there's not really chance to talk about anything other than the meeting agenda or the MDT list in front of you. To be honest, the vast majority of my interactions have been positive. What I particularly liked was a summer session for the region that I work in, where there were about where this digital meeting was arranged. There's about 3 speakers. I was one of them, and I discussed video clinics for particular patients on, say, oral therapy such as a CDK4/6 inhibitor, and how we had set that up, who that was used for, what the pros were, what the cons were, and what sort of troubles were that we faced and how we overcame them, and also things about home care and delivering medication at home, so real practical aspects. And I was able to share our local experience and to discuss that with colleagues that may be looking to set up a similar type of service. And with regards to the other speakers that I got to listen to and learn from, their experience really with particular drugs, what they'd moved to in the pandemic, and other topics of care, like whether particular subcut injections could be delivered at home, and what that might look like, and how other units have managed to take those sorts of projects forward. So it's really the getting people together and allowing educational content that's really practical to be discussed that I've really enjoyed, and when it's been helpful to other people, I've enjoyed that more. The obvious things come to play. So if we've had a meeting where the technology hasn't worked, or I suppose someone hasn't been able to mute their microphone, or there's been a lot of echo or some sort of technological issue really. And I think after a certain time in the pandemic, we all got used to using Teams or Zoom or whichever platform, and occasionally if there was somebody that was still struggling with the basic rules of it, such as turning your microphone off when you're not speaking to avoid echo and background noise and all the rest of it, I say that they were the things that were troubling. But it's mainly a technology thing. I don't think I've had a worst interaction, to be honest. If you don't know the person that you're dealing with or the team that you're dealing with, an email to properly introduce yourself, and to explain why you'd like to meet and the exact purpose of the meeting beforehand, because these things are often very tight scheduled and either done out of hours or very occasionally fitted in to the working day depending upon the content, so that the clinician knows exactly what the purpose of the meeting is, so we can both get the most out of it. I don't particularly like vagueness in such a short period of time, so I do like to know the exact purpose. If there's an educational content for a new drug or something like that, if you let the clinician know what's going to be discussed and how educational it may be, it might be that the clinician says, well, that's great, we can discuss it together, or they may wish to invite other members of the team to share their educational experience. So again, that's why sort of forward planning is best. If there's anything to discuss, such as a new drug, a new data, a new trial, new indication, or anything along those lines, sending material beforehand, I think would be very useful. Thirdly, and I can't stress this enough, this is probably the most important, is if you are going to show me data, slide sets, anything like that, check they work first, because that can be frustrating and a big time waste. And I think not everybody will have the same preferences, so I think asking the clinician or the team what they prefer overall, how they like their interactions to be, because I prefer 90+% virtual. There may be somebody that doesn't, so check in first rather than assuming one size fits all. I don't particularly like phone calls, for example, or text messages. I much prefer email and virtual by and large.